This Detroit News Podcast is brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another installment of the Injury Room, a Detroit Pistons podcast brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor. And as always, I'm your host, Pistons beat writer at the Detroit News, Coty M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on all your social media platforms at Coty Davis _24. Once again, that's Coty COTY DAVIS _24. And of course, I'm here with my co-host Tarohn. Tarohn, what's going on, man?
What's going on, Coty? And make sure you guys follow me on all social media platforms. That's Tarohn Finley, TAROHNFINLEY. Once again, TAROHNFINLEY. And as always, I'm ready to talk Pistons with you, Coty.
Are you wait? Are you ready to talk Pistons, or are you ready to talk Pistons playoffs? Because there's a difference between talking Pistons and talking Pistons playoffs, man. Because I don't know about you, but I'm excited. As everyone knows, the 2025-26 campaign is over. The regular season is over, that is, and Tarohn, the Pistons put in work throughout the whole entire regular season, and we're going to talk about how important it was for them to not only finish with home court advantage for the first round or the second round or, going into the third round. They literally finished the regular season as the number one team in the Eastern Conference with a 60-22 record. And Tarohn, like us, other reporters, fans, just basketball fans all over the globe, Pistons fans, everyone is excited for this playoffs because I think we all can agree that we are expecting this team to go on a deep playoff run. What does that look like? That's a debate that we can have a little bit later, especially once we find out who is going to be the Pistons' first round matchup. And as of right now, we're recording this before the start of the NBA play-in tournament. And look, it could be one of the four teams. At the start of the NBA play-in tournament, you got the Hornets taking on the Heat, the 76ers taking on the Magic. Really quick, because we touched on it the last time we did this podcast, Tarohn, out of these four teams, since it's officially official now, who would you like to see the Pistons go up against in the first round?
I think my answer is going to be pretty similar to who I had the last time, and I know we disagreed on it, but I would take the Charlotte Hornets just because, like I said, that rivalry, the suspension, like it's just so much stuff brewing between these two teams. And I know, the Pistons had, beat them the last time they just played, pretty recently, but still that in a playoff matchup. And I just really want to see how the Pistons go from being the underdog team last year against the Knicks to being the top team. And everyone's saying the Hornets are this year's Pistons. So that's why I really want to see those two teams match up against each other. But Coty, who do you want to see go against the Pistons in the first round?
To be honest with you, it really doesn't matter. I think the Pistons will have the upper hand out of all four of these teams. And to be honest with you, I don't even know who would be the hardest. I guess if I had to pick, the hardest would be possibly the Hornets, only because they are the only team that's left in the play-in tournament in general on both conferences that basically been playing the best stretch of basketball ever since January. However, we are about 5 days removed from the Pistons defeating them handily, especially considering that they held the Hornets, who have put together one of the league's best offense, not since January, but throughout the whole entire season. I believe they finished the year ranked 5th in offense, and they held the Charlotte Hornets to 10 points in the fourth quarter. 1 through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the fourth quarter, and beat them by double digits. And I think they ended up sweeping the regular season series out of them. So to be honest with you, Hornets, Heat, Magic, 76ers, I mean, at one point I thought the 76ers might have been the toughest matchup, only because not only do they have the experience, but they have two guys that, they have playoff experience, deep playoff experience. However, one of those guys in Joel Embiid, unfortunately, given the emergency illness that he had, literally just had surgery. He's not going to be part of the playoff. Paul George doesn't look like playoff P or PG-13 or all the other nicknames he had. So, look, to be honest with you, I think it's going to be a quick first round series for anybody that end up getting that number 8 seed. So to me, it really don't matter. But the reason why I feel so confident in saying that it really don't matter, and yes, I understand that playoffs are all about matchups. And with me, when you talk about how far this team can go, you look at the matchups, I think you really got to start taking a look at what's going to be ahead for the Pistons in that second round. I think that's when things really start getting interesting for them.
Right.
But the reason why I feel so strongly and confident about the Pistons and their ability to move past the first round, regardless who they get, is the fact that this is a team that won 60 games throughout the regular season. This is a team that finished second in defense. This is a team that finished ninth on the offensive side of the ball. This is a team that has not one, but 2 all NBA caliber players. This is a team who we all know that Victor Wembanyama is going to win Defensive Player of the Year. That's probably going to be an award that he's going to have locked up for the next 10 years, as long as he reaches 65 games or whatever the case might be. However, second on that list has to be Osar Thompson, who literally finished this season leading the league in steals. And as a matter of fact, I saw another interesting stat that I wrote about over at the Detroit News, 5 interesting facts about the Pistons heading into the playoffs. The Pistons had 3 players to rank top 30 in steals, along with Javonte Green and Cade Cunningham. And if you want to extend it to, I believe, the top 35, they will be the only team to have 4 when you account for Ron Holland. So Tarohn, just when you look back at what this team was able to do for 82 games, they finished with a 60-22 record, but I could count there's at least 3 or maybe 4 games that they could have possibly won, to make 60 into, let's say, 62, 63, maybe 64. Tarohn, what has been so remarkable about watching the Pistons this year? And 2, most importantly, being the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, I also want you to speak on the importance of having home court advantage throughout the whole entire Eastern Conference playoffs.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say that, this is coming from someone that grew up watching this team and have
and you young, so you don't know nothing about the going to work Pistons like I had growing up.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I don't know about the Pistons that went to championships, won championships. So just to see this turnaround over the last 2 seasons, I think you have to give a lot of credit, as we have done throughout, the season and the podcast, to JB Bickerstaff, who I think should be the favorite to win Coach of the Year. He's going to be up there for sure with guys like Joe Mazzulla, people like that. But also, like I said, Trajan Langdon, just what he's done as far as roster construction. Doesn't matter who's in the lineup, this team competes. And I just want to mention the fact that how rare this is. The Pistons have only achieved 60 wins 2 other times, in the 89-90 season and in the 05-06 season. So that just shows that this isn't something that the team just has consistently done. And this is coming from a team that went on a historic losing streak a few years ago, so bad that people did not want to go watch this team. So I want to just first credit that no matter what happens, I think this team, like the ceiling of this team, everyone wants at least the Eastern Conference finals appearance, really a finals appearance, and then see what happens in the finals. But this is a successful season no matter what happens. Like if they collapse in the first round, I think we have to look at that differently, but I don't really, like you said, think that's a thing that's going to happen. I would be surprised if someone takes a series past 5 games, maybe 6, if they just sneak and get lucky and win a game at home or so. But I do want to mention that part. And the other thing you mentioned was home court advantage. The Pistons games that I have attended this last year have been amazing. Like just going from a perspective of seeing the arena feel, well, not filled at all a few seasons ago, to like being one of the most energetic crowds that I've experienced. And I went to MSG this past winter, and it was a great experience. But I would rank Little Caesars right above that. I mean, not right above that, around that same type of arena atmosphere type of feel. And to have this throughout the just playoffs in general, things like that, until they get to the finals, I think that just is such an advantage, just because teams have to go through Detroit in order to, get to the finals. And that can be the difference maker when you're playing teams like going to the second round against the Cavs or Hawks or I mean the Knicks or the Hawks if they advance to the, Eastern Conference Finals, or the teams that are favored to get there like the Celtics or, the Cavs in the second round, people like that. So just for the Pistons to have that, I think that's going to be such a difference maker. But to answer your question, I just have been very impressed with this team. I think they've been the most consistent team throughout the season, including OKC. I think I would put the Pistons above them just as far as consistency and not losing. But what do you think about that, Coty, just having that home court advantage and just the turnaround you've seen these last 2 years that you've been covering the team?
Well, to answer your last question, the turnaround has been fast. I knew when I got here, I wasn't coming to a team that was going to lose 28 games or whatever the case might be. I thought that I was coming to a team going to have an opportunity to cover a team where you're going to see them going into last year compete for the play-in. And then put it like this. I thought last year they was going to compete for the play-in, actually make the play-in and get eliminated and miss the playoffs. The run that we saw them go on last year, I thought that was going to be this year's version of the Pistons. However, they ended up skipping like 2 of those steps, making the playoffs in general, like just making the playoffs right off the back last year. And now to go from the 6th seeded team last year to number 1 in the Eastern Conference, it's crazy. And not just number 1 in the Eastern Conference, to have the 3rd best record in the NBA. And look, as you know, in our business, we run across a lot of stats. And there are some stats you got to take with a grain of salt, especially when you see those graphics and stuff. But Sunday night, after they ended up beating the Indiana Pacers, that was win number 60 for them. I was in my hotel room finishing up, and I got on Twitter to post something. And when I got on Twitter, somebody posted a graphic. Matter of fact, it was from the league. And it said there has been 3 teams this year won 60 or more games. The Pistons, the Thunder, and the Spurs. And I sat there and thought to myself, if somebody would have told me about 2, maybe 3 years ago that these were going to be the top 3 teams in the league in like 2-3 years ago, I would not have believed it, because the Spurs and the Pistons, they were at the bottom of the league. The Pistons was a laughing stock, and the Thunder, they was up and coming, but it was like, well, it's going to take them some time. And all 3 of those teams literally just surpassed everything that we thought about them over these last 2 years. And now, if you see one, you're going to see one of those 3 teams in the finals, and nobody is going to be surprised, especially if it's like, of course, OKC or whatever the case might be. But for the Pistons in general, man, just watching, the growth that they have showcased over these last 2 years, man, it's been remarkable. And I love the fact that, matter of fact, I like how they did it, because they have done it in a variety of ways. There's a lot of times when you look at a team's success, without a shadow of a doubt, they're going to be quote unquote, they're going to struggle a lot without their star player. Look, you hate to see injuries, and we all hate to see what happened to Cade against the Washington Wizards when he suffered that collapsed lung. But those 11 games was needed, because they went 8-3 in those 11 games without Cade. And you're looking at a situation where they literally relied upon something that Coach JB Bickerstaff and Trajan Langdon has been preaching on ever since media day, which was that this team is so deep and talented. When we heard that on media day, we didn't believe it. We just thought that was your typical preseason training camp talk, yeah, we believe in everybody on this roster, blah, 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 blah. Like, we all heard it. We all write about it. It's the same old, regardless of sport, regardless of the league, regardless of the team. But I want to say this is probably the first time where a team literally said that and went about showcasing why they believe in all of those players on the roster. Because Tarohn, you saw it. Listeners and viewers, you saw it. Throughout the season, almost every single game, there was something going on with this team. Injury, suspension, somebody, not playing up to par or whatever the case might be. And JB Bickerstaff had the opportunity to adjust, puts trust in his players, and we're literally looking at them win 60 games in a variety of different ways. It wasn't just Cade dominating for the entire season. It wasn't just Jalen Duren dominating for the entire season. It wasn't Tobias Harris. Like, they just did it in so many ways, man. And that's part of the reason why I look at the Pistons and I'm saying to myself, they're going into the playoffs with one of the best chances to make it to the finals and possibly win the thing, depending on how certain things go. To answer your question about home court advantage, look, that's literally is going to be another benefit for the Pistons to have a deep playoff run. Once again, how deep, we don't know. We could debate about it, whatever the case might be. But I'm expecting them to get to at least the Eastern Conference Finals, and home court advantage is definitely going to play a big role in that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I want to emphasize, like, we talked about the improvement with the record and, from where they were. But I think that's the Pistons are, to me, the biggest storyline in the NBA right now, because you kind of, OKC's the most dominant team. And I think they're expected to go to the finals again, win the finals, even though they have a gauntlet in the West once they take on, whether that's the Nuggets or, the Spurs, whoever they match up against. It's no guarantee that they're going to get there. Right.
They're going, because that 7-foot big man, boy.
Right. We seen what he's done, when he's played the Pistons and what he's done to OKC. So
what he's done to the league, period.
Right. He's coming into the league once he's like healthy. So that's one of the biggest things. But back to the Pistons, I think they've been the biggest story of the NBA just because, like we said, they weren't expected to get here in some ways. Like, they were expected after last year's playoff run to do a little better. I don't think anyone expected first seed. And with all the injuries, even when we were talking about, like, what are some of our bold predictions coming in, we said maybe, Cade can compete for the MVP. But I don't really think anyone seen, to me, what has been their storyline is just improvement. We've seen, Asar go from like, a great, player, things like that, a great defender, to like one of the best defenders in the league, winning Defensive Player of the Month multiple times. We've seen Duren make that jump from, to me, like a lob threat, around the rim type of threat, to a true ball creator, all NBA caliber player. Like I said a few podcasts ago, I think he's been the best player on the Pistons before Cade went down, and him and
post All-Star.
Exactly, like post the All-Star break, they really carried this team through their toughest part of the schedule without Cade, and to continue to win games, to compete with OKC without your key contributors, not just Cade. I think improvement has just been the all-around just theme of this team. Improvement, grit, relying on, defense, and just their depth, like you said. Like, you go from guys like Kevin Huerter not being in the lineup to him being important down the stretch without Cade. Same thing with Sasser, Jenkins. Like, these guys were unknown to casual fans around the league, and now they're playing on the best Eastern Conference, or playing key roles on the best Eastern Conference team. So I just really wanted to emphasize that part, just the improvement all around, not just record-wise.
On the other side of the break, we're going to look at Cade Cunningham's season and see whether or not he's going to have an opportunity to still qualify for regular season awards.
For 44 years, Varsity Ford in Ann Arbor has been more than just a dealership. We're a family, proudly serving yours. As one of the top volume Ford dealers in the world, we're proof that when you treat people right, they come back generation after generation. And now we make it easier than ever with complimentary pickup and delivery for both sales and service, so you can buy or service your Ford without leaving home. Varsity Ford, driven by family, built on tradition.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this latest installment of the Injury Room, a Detroit Pistons podcast brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor. So with the Pistons finishing the season 60-22, there are a lot of awards that the Pistons can win on the individual level, of course. However, I think the biggest one that everyone is kind of holding their breath for as of right now is Cade Cunningham. We all know the story. Cade was having an MVP caliber season, definitely would have finished in the top 3, was literally a foregone conclusion that he was going to be named to the All-NBA first team. However, we know the story. March 17th against Washington, he dives for a loose ball, get kneed in the back, collapsed lung, miss 11 games. However, at first it seemed like there was no chance of him being eligible for regular season awards. However, the players union can file a grievance on his behalf. If they do, and we should be hearing something at the time of this recording within the next day or so, but if the players union file a grievance on Cunningham's approach, there's going to be a panel that's going to determine whether or not the 11 games that Cade missed, could he or could he not have played. We all know that he cannot play with a collapsed lung. However, there's a catch. This union, not only are they going to look at the 11 games that Cade missed due to the collapsed lung, but they're also going to look back and take a look at the other 8 games that Cade missed and determine whether or not if there was 1, maybe 2 games that he could have played that he didn't. Now, some people might say, that's a little bit unfair, but on the flip side, I think if the players union filed the grievance and they look at, not just the 11 games that he missed due to the collapsed lung, but look at the other 8 games, I'm here to say that those 8 games that Cade missed, he literally could not play. He was literally dealing with some tough injuries. And the one thing that I love the most about Cade this season is the fact that I don't think, and Tarohn, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there was a moment this season where you saw Cade not playing due to injury management. And he played through a lot of injuries this season. And I just think that I just hope, let me just say, I hope that the players union, this grievance and everything does get passed in Cade's favor so he can be eligible, because he's more than deserving for any type of awards that was going to come his way.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought this was such a just interesting thing to really track. I know for Yahoo, they had a tracker on who was going to be eligible for the MVP, and Cade looked like a lock being like, at least the all NBA awards categories, just because I think he was at 61 games or close to, very close to the 65 game rule. So this wasn't really I feel like the league had looked at this rule as an issue because, there was other key players that wouldn't be eligible for awards. But until Cade went down, I don't feel like people were really examining that this is something that needs to be changed. So I do think that no matter what happens, I do want to say that part, that Cade is going to be responsible for changing this rule. I don't think this rule is going to stay the exact same. I think they will have some, it might be similar to what the rule looks like now, but they might tweak it. Maybe they reduce the games. Maybe it's 60 games. Maybe it's not so strict on the minutes limit, because I remember you had asked, I think it was Steve Kerr, about what did he think about the rule. And he explained that, some players aren't going to be eligible because they might not play a certain amount of minutes in each game. So this rule is so complicated. And I think
to your point, really quick, I'm sorry to cut you off. There's a player, I can't remember who it was, but there's a player this year who appeared in all 82 games. But because he was a reserve player, and I think he would have been up for 6th man of the year. I'm gonna have to go back and find it. I think he would have been up for 6th man of the year. He appeared in all 32 games, but because he did not meet the quote unquote minutes restriction that they have, because you have to play 20 or more minutes, he's not eligible. Make that make sense. You played in all 82 from opening night in mid-October all the way to the final game of the regular season on Sunday, April, what was it, 12, 13, whichever day that was. He's not going to be eligible because there were games where he played less than 20 minutes. That is crazy.
And he's coming off the bench. That's why I'm saying, this rule should definitely be tweaked, because in all games shouldn't be measured the same. Do you want Cade to be out there, playing 30-something minutes? Because we have seen him do that. But he doesn't have to do that in every game, especially if they're up by a large margin. And I don't feel like that's load managing. I just think that's being smart with the player, because if JB Bickerstaff, look at, for example, actually, I just thought about this. Tom Thibodeau, people criticize him for playing his players too much, but that's what you almost have to do with this rule in order for your players to be eligible for awards and things like that. And I think, you did a great job, like talking about like Isaiah Stewart, and because you really have dived into this rule and getting coaches and players' perspective. But I thought it was so telling that Isaiah Stewart was almost willing to risk playing through injuries in order to qualify for some of the, like defensive player of the year, or defensive team more likely kind of stuff. So I think that Cade is going to be the trailblazer of change, and that this rule has to be examined, or they're going to have either more players playing through injuries, which, that won't help anybody in the playoffs. That's why Stewart, sat out all those games, because it's better for him to play in the playoffs and not miss a second consecutive playoffs if he gets re-injured than it is to get awards. But why can't players get recognized for both? Like sit out when they're actually injured, but, are eligible for these things. So I think back to answer your question, with Cade's injury, and also Luka, who also was, got injured at the end of the season, the NBA has to look at this rule, or there's just going to be, like the players just don't seem to like it. The coaches don't seem to like it. It just seems like all around people have negative reviews about it. But what are some of the things that you have seen or you have found from your research, talking to some of the best players, the coaches, and particularly like Cade, and, you can even mention Isaiah Stewart, on what you have found that players and coaches and stuff like that think about the rule in, regards to Cade not being eligible if he is.
Well, the one thing that I know for a fact is the players and the coaches, they actually respect the rule. And it makes sense because, yes, there's been times throughout the past where people will vote for an ex player because look, they're talented when they're healthy and out there, but they only played like 45, 50 games or whatever the case might be. So from that perspective, they understand it, especially more so for a guy like Cade. And I had an opportunity to ask him, when he came back, when he made his return, I asked him, how do you feel about the support that people have been giving you about whether or not you should be eligible for the awards? And not only that, what are your thoughts about the 65 game rules? Do you think it should be revamped? Do you think they should do away with it? And this is what he had to say.
It's a good question. I feel a lot of different ways about it. I think what they were trying to do with it is have superstars play and not sit out, just to rest. Because fans pay a lot of money to come watch us play games. So I have a lot of respect for that. I know, the fans come to watch me play, and I want to make sure that I'm available and I give them a show whenever they come out. So in that way, I respect the rule. I think it's a good rule in that way. It's tough for me right now this year because I think I did a lot of work to, be in consideration for awards and All-NBA and all that stuff. So I'm in a tough spot, but I think it'll all play out how it's supposed to play out, and I'm just trying to do my best to help my team win. I'm hearing all this stuff about exceptions and all this other stuff. I don't know how all that stuff works. I'll just keep doing my job day by day, and whatever comes will come. Whatever's meant to be will be.
I do feel like Cade might have been the best player to kind of have this happen to him, because when I asked him that, I was expecting more so a combative answer, but you just saw he was cool, calm, and collected. And by the way, Cade is always cool, calm, and collected. In 2 years I've been around him. That's who Cade is. But I like the fact how he mentioned he understands the rule and everything, and he, you heard it in the statement. He understands that this rule was passed so superstars could play. He always want to be available and give the fans a show. And my God, he have given people shows over these last 2 years, especially this year. But I do like the fact how that video literally sums up how the players and the coaches feel about this rule. It's not a bad rule, and majority of them wants to see the rule, but a lot of them want more clarity, and they also want a situation where if a player is 100% hurt, or if he's dealing with an ongoing nagging issue, that cannot be held against him. Because when all of this started, and I asked Coach JB Bickerstaff about his thoughts, he basically said the same thing that you just heard Cade Cunningham say, but he also said that he feels that that any player should not rush back from injuries or feel like they should have to play through injuries just because they want to be qualified for any type of award. So, this 65 game rule, man, Tarohn, as you just mentioned, ever since it happened to Cade, and right after Cade, Luka got hurt. He's not going to be eligible as of right now. I think him and Luka are the only two players who are not eligible at this moment, where the Players Association can file a grievance in their favor and see if they could get them eligible. Other big name players who are not going to be eligible around that time when Cade went out was Anthony Edwards, and Victor. He came close of not being eligible, and if he wasn't eligible for any type of award, that's what it literally just set the whole league on fire. But everyone just wants more clarity on what should be accepted, especially considering let's be honest, a freak accident that Cade just got himself into, because you don't hear nothing about a collapsed lung in the NBA. I think it's been I want to say about 5 cases of these prior to Cade. 2 of those was CJ McCullough, and that was the former president of the Players Association. I had an opportunity to caught up with him, and he said the same thing, that the rule was passed for a reason, but it does need to be revamped and have more clarity when you get into these type of situations, especially someone like a Cade, a Luka, and even Anthony Edwards, who have played over 2,000 minutes for the season.
Right. And I think, like you said, there are some benefits of the rule. I think like Adam Silver has spoke a lot about it recently, just saying that, like Cade said, it was the NBA's response to load management, to having players sitting out, especially on national games where like you can turn on the game and you can expect to see maybe one of the stars playing at different times. I want to say the last few years before this rule was introduced, you can just expect to not see star players in the lineup, especially late in the season, I would say, before the playoffs. Because I used to always tell my friends, like, I can't really watch NBA in April until the playoffs, just because all the teams seems like they're sitting out the entire team, stuff like that. So I do understand the rule. And there's been cases where, to me, players shouldn't have been counted for things like that. Like, for example, I know Joel Embiid didn't win the Rookie of the Year. I think that was 2016, 2017, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Where they gave it to Brogdon because he only played 30-something games, but he shouldn't have even really qualified to be in the running, because while he was dominant and has went on to have a dominant career, that's so little. Like, it's not like Cade has played 30 games, because even like Steph Curry, he wasn't eligible, but he only played like 30-something games this season. He's been out for the majority of the season. So that's a difference than what Cade or Luka is going through. And I also wanted to mention, a lot of people, like Adam Silver has mentioned, like if one of these players go down, it's an opportunity for the other players to stand out and, make the award. I mean, make like all NBA team, things like that in their career, which I'm all for players getting opportunities, but that's when they deserve to get these opportunities, not just because, a player is like not eligible to play. This is like, to me, I'm, a big football fan when, they had, Pro Bowl votings and stuff, which is crazy now. And they just had Shedeur Sanders and Joe Flacco in the Pro Bowl. So players should get these opportunities when they deserve it, not just because someone isn't eligible and we just have to find a replacement. So those were all things I want to see, but I do think the league will, like you said, and like a lot of people, they will, I think, tweak this rule, but it will be interesting to see if that's going to be next season or if they're going to make an exception for Cade and Luka and players like that, because they definitely have had such a great season. They deserve to at least be recognized in all NBA conversation, in my opinion.
And with that being said, that's going to conclude another installment of the Engine Room of the Detroit Pistons podcast, brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor. As always, I'm your host, Pistons beat writer at the Detroit News, Coty M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on all your social media platforms at Coty Davis _24. Once again, that's Coty COTYDAVIS _24.
And make sure you guys follow me on all social media platforms. That's Tarohn Finley, TAROHNFINLEY. Once again, TAROHNFINLEY.
Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, next time we come back on this podcast, we will know who the Pistons will be playing in the first round, and I can't wait. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.